Hi everyone, just thought I'd put together this guidance for the first assessment. I've put the full wording for the assessment up in WebLearn now, but I just thought I'd run you through the concept here. Some of the language isn't as clear as it could be in it. Basically, the task is to discuss the origins, development and current status of a specific European Community Company Law directive related to corporate governance. So the first thing we need to do is actually identify a directive. Now if you go back and look at the week that we looked at the harmonisation programme, any of the directives we discussed there are suitable for this, or any other directives in the Vanessa Edwards text useful. It's good to find a directive that you actually have some identity with here, because it makes the work far more interesting than it otherwise might be. Okay, so we find the directive we're interested in. What's the next thing to take into account? Well, what you're asked in the task is to take into account of the influence of and impact upon the national corporate governance models and company structures in the UK and Germany. So we're going to have to take that into account as well. So from the directive, let's go to our rationale and justification. We saw that all the directives need to be based back in the original treaty. There has to be justification and rationale as to why we're going to approximate, harmonise, however we want to refer to it, a particular area of company law. What then happens is that individual member states get involved in negotiations on how that directive might look, and this is where we need to take into account our modes of corporate governance and company structures. So we need to understand our UK context and we need to understand our German context. So by now we've got a body of work already. We've got the basis for our directive, we've got where things stood in the UK. It may be specifically where the law stood around that, but also some of the general corporate governance background, the models of the UK maybe, and of course of Germany. And we can reflect in the negotiations how far that's going to go on to shape the directive. Now, if you're doing something like the fifth directive, this is about as far as you can go, because obviously it didn't become a directive. It got stalled in the negotiations. Now that's absolutely fine to talk about that, but most people don't do that directive. What we would then need to do from there, once a directive is in place, we then need to think about, well, how does that impact back on to the UK and on to Germany? So you see here the report should take into account of the influence of and the impact upon the national corporate governance models and company structures. So we've traced their influence on it, and we're now looking at how far it's impacted upon change. So we're looking at the transposition here back into the member states. And the very last thing that it's worth reflecting on is their difference. The whole process has been about approximation, harmonisation, however we want to take it. So really in evaluating this process, once we've seen a directive transposed, it's very interesting to look at whether they've actually achieved the harmonisation or approximation, or whether we can still see significant differences in place. Okay, well, I hope this is useful to you. And any other questions, I'm more than happy to talk about this in class. Okay.